The sun was barely climbing over the horizon at Naval Air Station Pensacola when Lieutenant Jessica Maverick Hayes stepped onto the tarmac, her flight boots crunching against the frost-hardened concrete. The morning fog clung to the runway like a ghostly veil, curling around the nose of the FA-18 Hornets lined up like silent sentinels. Her flight bag weighed heavily on her shoulder, not with equipment, but with the invisible weight of expectation. Today was her first day in the famed Blue Angels training program, an honor no one in her family had ever dared imagine. Her hair was tucked into a perfect bun beneath her helmet, the corners of her uniform crisp and precise. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind for years. The first step onto the tarmac, the first handshake with the commanding officer, the first roar of afterburners in her ears. Yet nothing prepared her for the feeling of eyes on her, not just curious glances from fellow pilots, but the deliberate, calculating stare of the man she had heard about in every military anecdote, Rear Admiral Thomas Hawkeye Donovan. He was a legend, both revered and feared, a man who could command an entire fleet with nothing more than a raised eyebrow or a single clipped order. Maverick had seen the stories in military magazines and documentaries. Donovan, with his iron jaw and hawk-like gaze, had trained pilots who had flown into history. And now one of them, or maybe two, would be her peers, and she would have to prove herself worthy under his scrutiny. The moment she reached the flight line, Donovan was already there, standing with hands clasped behind his back, watching the lineup of rookies with the patience of a predator. His uniform was immaculate, his medals gleaming despite the morning haze, and his eyes, sharp, calculating, pinned her in place the instant she walked into their line of vision. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said finally, his voice carrying over the distant hum of engines warming up. There was a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, subtle enough that only someone paying attention would notice. "Quite the call sign you've picked there. Maverick, huh? Trying to live up to a movie." A ripple of chuckles ran through the rookies standing next to her. Some of them whispered behind gloved hands, their tone both teasing and curious. Maverick felt her stomach knot. She had expected tests, formations, even grueling physical trials, but mockery, that stung sharper than any engine blast. She straightened, letting the calm she had rehearsed for years settle over her like a shield. "Sir," she said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her ears, "I intend to live up to it." Donovan raised an eyebrow, clearly amused, his smirk widening. Bold words from someone who hasn't even seen the sky from a Blue Angel's cockpit yet. "I hope your flying matches your confidence, Lieutenant." As he turned away to inspect the other rookies, Maverick couldn't help noticing the glint of something unreadable in his eyes. There was challenge there, yes, but something more, a subtle spark of recognition, as if he had seen this particular fire before. Her chest tightened with anticipation. She had heard of Donovan's reputation for identifying potential in pilots almost instantly. If he had noticed something in her, it could either be the beginning of the career she dreamed of, or the start of a trial that would test her limits in ways she hadn't imagined. The instructors called the rookies to the briefing room, where large monitors displayed aerial formations, maneuver schematics, and mission simulations. Maverick took a seat at the far end, next to another rookie with a quiet confidence that seemed at odds with her own jittering nerves. She studied the maps, the diagrams, the endless streams of numbers and altitudes, all meant to intimidate the unprepared. She had spent years preparing for this moment, yet she could feel the stakes rising with every passing second. Hours melted into an unforgiving routine of ground school, simulations, and pre-flight checks. The roar of jet engines outside became the pulse of the base itself, hammering against her ribs like a physical reminder that the real test was not in classrooms, but in the sky. Every command Donovan barked during the drills was sharp, precise, and laden with hidden meaning, forcing rookies to react instinctively. One wrong move could mean humiliation. One small success might earn a glance from the Admiral that could shift a career. By mid-afternoon, Donovan called a sudden assembly on the flight line. Maverick's heart lurched in anticipation. The rookies lined up beside the aircraft, engines idling and sending tremors through the tarmac. Donovan circled them like a hawk evaluating prey, eyes narrowing slightly as he approached her. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said, voice low, carrying over the steady roar of the jets. "I hope you're as fast in the air as you are in speech. We'll see soon enough." Before she could respond, the ground trembled under the might of the Blue Angels, jets taking off one by one. Donovan motioned toward the sky. Maverick followed his gesture, her pulse quickening. Through the misty morning light, the Blue Angels streaked across the horizon in perfect formation, engines screaming, bodies twisting through gravity-defying loops and rolls. The sight was breathtaking, terrifying, exhilarating all at once. And then Donovan leaned closer, just enough that she could feel the weight of his gaze. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "you fly with them. All eyes will be on you. One mistake," he paused, letting the unspoken threat hang in the misted air like a knife. "And everyone remembers, one perfect move," his lips quirked into that half-smirk again, "and you'll have everyone's respect, even mine." Maverick's stomach tightened. Her training had prepared her for the technicalities, for the maneuvers, for the physical endurance, but not for this. The idea that she would be scrutinized not just for skill, but for presence, for courage, for the ability to command respect in the blink of an eye, pressed against her like the heavy flight suit she wore. She swallowed hard, trying to steady the nervous energy that hummed through her veins. As the sun dipped behind the hangars, casting long shadows over the tarmac, Maverick took a deep breath. Tomorrow, she would step into the cockpit of an FA-18 Hornet and join the Blue Angels in their high-stakes performance. And behind her, Donovan's smirk lingered in her mind, a reminder that every eye, every calculation, every decision she made would be measured. Her call sign, Maverick, suddenly felt heavier than ever, an invisible badge daring her to rise, daring her to prove that she wasn't just a name lifted from a movie. She wasn't here to be mocked. She was here to dominate. And somewhere deep in her gut, Maverick sensed it. This was more than just a flight test. Tomorrow would change everything. As she walked back to the barracks, the tarmac now silent except for the faint echo of engines fading into the distance, her phone buzzed with a single, cryptic message from an unknown number. "Don't just fly, Maverick, survive." Her fingers froze over the screen. Who could have sent it? And more importantly, what exactly was she about to survive? Dawn arrived quicker than Maverick expected, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and violet. The air smelled of jet fuel and frost, mingling with the faint tang of adrenaline that coursed through the rookie's veins. She laced up her boots, checked her flight suit, and ran her hands over the polished helmet one more time. The roar of engines outside wasn't just sound. It was a promise of danger, of challenge, of proving herself against the legendary Blue Angels. The briefing room was quiet except for the hum of overhead lights. Donovan entered without a word, his presence immediately filling the room. Every rookie instinctively straightened, but Maverick's spine stiffened more than most. His eyes scanned each face, pausing on her for a fraction longer than she expected before he finally spoke. "Today you fly with the Angels," Donovan said, voice low, precise. "Not alongside them, you are them. You are the test. One mistake, one hesitation." He let the words hang like a guillotine above their heads. "And you'll learn very quickly why we are feared, not just respected." Maverick felt her stomach tighten, the weight of those words pressing down on her like the nose of an FA-18 diving at Mach speed. Her mind raced, recalling every simulation, every aerobatic maneuver she'd ever practiced. But simulations didn't scream, didn't shake the tarmac under your feet, didn't carry the threat of disaster if you slipped by even a fraction of a second. The rookies were herded onto the flight line. The Hornets gleamed in the morning sun, every rivet and panel perfect. Maverick climbed into her jet, her hands moving with rehearsed precision as she strapped into the seat, checked her instruments, and ran through pre-flight sequences. Her heart was hammering like a piston engine, but her voice stayed steady over the intercom. Systems check complete. All instruments nominal. The engine roared to life, vibrating through her entire body. She rolled forward onto the runway, the world narrowing to the view ahead, the hum of machinery, and the sharp edge of her own focus. Donovan's voice crackled through the radio. "Lieutenant Hayes, show me what Maverick means." The words hit her like a challenge thrown in the face of fate itself. Maverick pushed the throttle forward, the Hornet screaming as it tore down the runway, lifting into the sky with a force that pressed her into her harness. The ground fell away beneath her, replaced by clouds, sun, and the endless horizon of possibility and danger. She joined the formation, keeping pace with the seasoned angels. Each maneuver was a dance at the edge of physics, rolls, loops, split-S turns, banking at impossible angles. Maverick's fingers flew over controls, her eyes scanning instruments while tracking the jets around her. She could feel the wind tearing at the edges of her vision, the G-forces bending her body like rubber. Yet she held, perfecting each maneuver with the precision of a surgeon. Then came the first real test. Donovan's voice came over the comm. "Formation split. Left wing maintain position. Maverick take point." Maverick's stomach dropped. Taking point meant leading, making split-second decisions that the rest of the formation would follow blindly. One wrong move and disaster was inevitable. Her heart raced, every instinct screaming caution, but she clenched her jaw, reminding herself of the message from yesterday. Don't just fly, Maverick. Survive. The Hornet surged forward, banking into the tightest turn of her life. Her world became a blur of blue sky, gray clouds, and screaming jet engines. Sweat ran down her spine, dampening the flight suit. She felt the G-forces trying to crush her lungs, but she ignored it, relying on muscle memory, training, and sheer determination. Then a miscalculation, a brief, horrifying slip. The wingman on her right clipped just a little too close, sending a shockwave through the formation. Maverick's heart lurched. She fought for control, rolling the jet just enough to correct the angle, but the Hornet shuddered violently under her fingers. One wrong move, 1 second too slow. Behind her, she heard the sharp, controlled voice of Donovan through the comm, tinged with uncharacteristic tension. "Hayes, steady, steady, don't overcorrect." Her hands shook as she guided the jet back into formation, aligning perfectly just as the Angels executed a synchronized loop. Relief washed over her briefly, but it was short-lived. Maverick knew that one mistake could erase weeks of effort, and Donovan's gaze, though invisible in the sky, loomed over her like a specter, demanding perfection. They broke formation, jets slicing through clouds like knives. Maverick's breathing was ragged, but her focus was unbroken. She looked down at the patch on her shoulder, Blue Angel's insignia, silver stitching glinting in sunlight, and felt a flicker of pride. She had survived her first flight. She had led, she had held the line, and she had earned the first, cautious glimmer of respect from her legendary commander. Yet Donovan wasn't smiling. His voice cut through the radio again, crisp, unnerving. "Good, not perfect. Tomorrow we fly higher, faster, and one more warning." Maverick's stomach sank. The warning tone in his voice wasn't just about flying, it was about something else. Something unspoken, lurking just beyond the horizon of the formation. "Someone won't come back if they falter. Choose wisely, Lieutenant." The words left the radio, but their echo clung to her, twisting her excitement into a tangle of fear and anticipation. She landed the Hornet with trembling hands, heart still pounding but adrenaline refusing to fade. Ground crew rushed to meet her, but her eyes scanned the sky. Donovan's jet had landed ahead, immobile, silent, and his gaze, when it met hers, was unreadable. Maverick stepped down from the cockpit, her boots hitting the tarmac like a drum beat, marking the first chapter of something far bigger than her. She had survived her first flight with the Blue Angels, but she had a sinking feeling in her chest. Survival was only the beginning. As she walked back toward the hangar, a faint shadow flickered across the morning mist. A helicopter descending too quickly, too low, its purpose unknown. Maverick froze. Her heart pounded in her ears, not from exertion but from instinct. Something or someone was coming for them. And Donovan, standing at the edge of the tarmac, didn't flinch. He simply smirked. The helicopter descended like a predator over the base, its rotors slicing through the morning air, stirring mist and frost into a turbulent swirl. Maverick froze mid-step, her instincts screaming as every hair on her arms bristled. The rookies behind her hesitated, uncertainty etched across their faces. This wasn't part of any scheduled training. The base's usual rhythm, the engines, the drills, the endless flow of aircraft, suddenly felt fragile, suspended on a knife's edge. Donovan didn't flinch. He remained at the tarmac's edge, hands clasped behind his back, his eyes tracking the helicopter's descent with the precision of a hawk. A flicker of something, anticipation, curiosity, crossed his face. Maverick had learned one truth already. Donovan never reacted without reason. Whatever was coming, it was intentional. The helicopter touched down with a thud that vibrated through the soles of her boots. The ramp dropped, revealing figures in tactical gear, their faces obscured by helmets and visors. They moved with a synchronized, almost mechanical precision that set Maverick's nerves on edge. One of them carried a small black case. Another held a tablet with a live feed of something. She couldn't yet tell what. Her radio crackled, Donovan's voice sharp and calm. "Lieutenant Hayes, stand by. You're about to witness what most pilots never see. Not in training, not in combat, and certainly not on a routine morning at Pensacola." Maverick's stomach twisted. Her first instinct was to argue, to say she was a rookie, to insist that she wasn't ready for whatever lay ahead. But something in Donovan's tone, the quiet authority, the weight of his reputation, made her bite back the words. She knew better than to interrupt a man who had seen war in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The figures approached the Blue Angel's hangar. Maverick followed at a cautious distance, curiosity burning through her anxiety. The air felt electric, charged with tension, the sound of rotors blending with the distant hum of jets warming up. One of the tactical operatives stopped, raising a hand toward Donovan. They exchanged a few words too quick for Maverick to catch. The operative gestured toward her. "Lieutenant Hayes," Donovan's voice was calm but carried a subtle edge. "You're coming with me." Her heart leapt. Her first thought was panic. Why her? She had barely survived her first formation flight. Why would Donovan pull her into this mysterious scenario? But before she could question, the Admiral's piercing gaze met hers, and she felt an unspoken command: follow and don't falter. They entered the helicopter, its interior dark and cramped. The operatives handed Donovan the black case. Maverick's eyes caught a glimpse of its insignia, top secret, classified, ominous. She swallowed hard, every nerve screaming that she was stepping into a world far beyond Blue Angel's aerobatics. The rotor blades kicked up wind, tossing her hair across her face as the helicopter lifted into the sky, leaving the tarmac and her sense of normalcy behind. From her vantage point, the base shrank below her, a grid of metal and concrete against a pastel sky. Donovan remained silent, eyes forward, the black case resting between his knees. Maverick's fingers twitched over the edge of her seat, itching to ask questions, but she forced herself to remain still. She didn't know the rules of this new game, but she understood one principle clearly. In Donovan's world, asking too much too soon could be deadly. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. The helicopter banked sharply, heading over the Gulf Coast. Donovan finally broke the silence, his voice low but commanding. "This is your first lesson beyond formation flight, Lieutenant. Skill is nothing without judgment. Courage is nothing without calculation. And today, we test both." The black case slid toward her side as he opened it. Inside lay a small, nondescript device, its purpose unclear but exuding an aura of urgency. A tablet beside it displayed a map with coordinates and flashing red icons. Maverick's pulse surged. Your task, Donovan continued, is simple in theory, impossible in execution. Navigate to the target, deploy the device, and return. Fail, and, well, you won't be the first pilot to learn the consequences firsthand. But succeed, he paused, letting the tension hang thick in the air. And you earn more than skill. You earn trust, even mine. Maverick's fingers brushed the device. It was heavier than she expected, both physically and symbolically. Her mind raced: coordinates, altitude, wind speeds, potential threats. She had never faced anything like this, not in simulations, not in any training module. The cockpit wasn't just a machine here, it was the threshold between life and death. The helicopter descended to deploy her. Donovan's eyes met hers one last time. Remember, Hayes, your call sign isn't a nickname, it's a warning. She swallowed, her throat tight. Yes, sir. The rotors cut sharply as she ejected from the helicopter in a specialized seat designed for rapid deployment. She plummeted toward the gulf below, the wind screaming past her ears, saltwater mist stinging her face. Her instincts screamed panic, but her training took over. She adjusted her trajectory, releasing the parachute at precisely the right altitude. The chute bloomed, catching the wind and slowing her descent. She scanned the water below. A small, uninhabited island marked the coordinates. Maverick's stomach twisted. She knew the exercise wasn't just about precision. It was about pressure, about making decisions under absolute isolation, under extreme risk. As she approached the island, she realized the device wasn't simple at all. It required precision placement, timing, and understanding of something far beyond her training. One misstep, and the mission, and perhaps her life, would fail. She landed on the wet sand, adrenaline still surging. The island was eerily silent, the gulf lapping against jagged rocks, the morning sun glinting off the device in her hands. Maverick took a deep breath, centering herself. She had survived the flight, survived the jump, but the hardest part was ahead. A shadow moved across the tree line. Maverick froze, pulse hammering. Someone or something was watching. Her fingers tightened around the device. The calm, commanding voice of Donovan came over the radio, faint but clear. Step carefully, Lieutenant. Not everyone here wants you to succeed. And in that moment, the wind carried a whisper she couldn't place, a hiss of danger brushing against her ear. Maverick, we've been waiting for you. Maverick crouched behind a jagged rock, her breath coming in short, controlled bursts. The Gulf's waves hissed against the shore like the whispers of 1,000 unseen eyes. The device in her hands felt heavier than ever, not just in weight, but in the responsibility it carried. Every instinct screamed caution. She had trained for years to handle aircraft, instruments, and formations, but nothing had prepared her for this. Complete isolation, a mission veiled in secrecy, and the unmistakable sense that someone or something was watching her every move. The shadow at the tree line hadn't moved. Maverick's gaze sharpened, scanning the dense scrub for any sign of movement. Sunlight fractured through the foliage, casting streaks across the sand, turning ordinary branches into potential threats. Her mind raced through possibilities: enemy operatives, a test from Donovan himself, or a trap she couldn't yet understand. Her radio crackled, Donovan's voice low, cutting through the static. Lieutenant Hayes, remember your training: precision, observation, patience. One wrong step and he paused, leaving the threat dangling in the air. You'll understand why some pilots never return from exercises like this. Maverick's stomach twisted. She had expected pressure, but this was a full immersion into danger, and the rules were invisible. She moved cautiously, feet silent on the wet sand, heart hammering. Every snap of a twig sounded like gunfire in her ears. Every ripple in the water seemed like a signal. She reached the coordinates marked on the tablet. The device needed deployment on a rocky outcrop jutting into the Gulf. From her vantage point, it seemed deceptively simple: place the device, activate, return. But the island's topography was deceptive, and the shadows lurking in the forest made every step feel like a misstep away from survival. Suddenly, movement, sharp, deliberate, too quick to be an animal. Maverick froze. Her instincts screamed, hide, assess, act. The shadow emerged, a figure in tactical gear moving with silent precision. Not just any operative, someone trained, someone lethal. Maverick's mind raced. Was this a test or a real threat? The figure stopped, scanning her position. Maverick crouched lower, heart hammering in her chest. She remembered Donovan's words, patience. She waited, counting seconds that stretched into eternity, calculating angles, escape routes, contingencies. The operative adjusted their stance, then moved along the tree line, not toward her but parallel. Maverick's pulse began to steady. This was no accident. Whatever this was, it was designed to test more than her flying skills. It was a test of awareness, of composure under pressure, of decision-making when stakes were life and death. She sprinted toward the outcrop, careful to stay in the folds of shadows, the device clutched tightly. The rocks were slick from salt spray, threatening to betray her balance. One misstep in the device and her mission would be compromised. She placed it carefully, aligning it precisely with the coordinates. A faint hum emanated from the device as it activated. Green lights blinked, confirming deployment. Maverick exhaled, a wave of relief threatening to loosen her focus. She wasn't safe yet, not by a long shot. A sudden, sharp sound from behind, the crack of a branch breaking under weight, made her spin. The figure from the tree line had doubled back, faster than she expected, moving toward her position with lethal precision. Maverick's heart raced. She could see their visor glinting in the sunlight, unreadable, intimidating. Every instinct screamed fight or flight, but she couldn't risk exposure. Any misstep now could be fatal. She ducked behind the rocks, the device between her and the approaching threat. Donovan's voice came over the radio, calm but carrying that unmistakable edge. Hayes, adapt. Improvise. You're not just a pilot, think like one. Move like one. Survive. Maverick's mind snapped into overdrive. She spotted a narrow gap in the rock formation leading down to a cove. If she could reach it, she could conceal herself until the figure passed, or maybe turn the element of surprise to her advantage. She bolted, muscles screaming, saltwater spray stinging her face. The operative mirrored her movement, their pace relentless, calculated. As she reached the cove, Maverick realized this wasn't just a physical test, it was psychological. Every motion, every choice, every heartbeat was being measured, weighed, judged. She could almost feel Donovan's gaze behind her, invisible but omnipresent. Her mind raced for a strategy. She could create a diversion, perhaps use the terrain, the tide, the rocks to obscure her trail. Improvisation became instinct. Maverick grabbed a piece of driftwood, hurling it across the sand to create noise. The operative paused, reacting instinctively, giving her just enough time. She slipped into a shadowed alcove, her lungs burning, pulse hammering, waiting. Minutes felt like hours. The figure searched methodically, but eventually moved on, leaving Maverick shaken but intact. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the device's activation panel. The mission was far from over. Extraction still awaited, and every second in isolation left her vulnerable. The distant thrum of the helicopter signaled her pickup point. Maverick sprinted toward it, adrenaline mixed with dread. She leapt onto the sandbank, scanning the horizon. The pilot in the helicopter was skilled, dropping a rope ladder with precision. She climbed quickly, muscles straining, every sense alert. As she reached the top, the helicopter surged upward, leaving the island and its hidden threats behind. But just as the rotor wash caught her, a flash of movement below made her freeze. Another figure, different from the first, emerged from the trees, standing still, arms raised in warning or challenge. Maverick didn't have time to analyze. Donovan's voice cut through the wind in her headset. "Lieutenant Hayes, welcome to the real test. And congratulations, you've only begun." Maverick's stomach dropped. She had survived, but the shadow lurking over the island wasn't gone. It was only the beginning. And as the helicopter banked back toward base, The unknown operative in the distance raised something glinting in the sun. A signal, a weapon, a warning. Maverick's fingers clenched over the edge of the seat. She knew, without a doubt, the next chapter would demand more than skill. It would demand courage, instinct, and perhaps a touch of madness. The helicopter touched down on the tarmac with a jolt that sent Maverick's stomach lurching. Sweat and salt water streaked her face, her flight suit damp from exertion and adrenaline. Ground crews swarmed the aircraft, checking rotors and securing gear, but Maverick barely noticed. Her mind was still tangled in the events on the island, the operatives, the shadows, the cryptic warning from Donovan. Donovan was already waiting at the base's edge, his eyes scanning her with the same unreadable intensity as before. His expression didn't change when she landed. It was neither approval nor disapproval, merely a measured expectation that seemed to weigh heavier than the gulf itself. "Lieutenant Hayes," he said, voice low but carrying authority, "report." Maverick's chest tightened. She recounted every movement, every decision, every fleeting second of fear and calculation. The takeoff, the parachute drop, the device placement, the confrontation with the first operative, the extraction. Every detail mattered because Donovan noticed everything, remembered everything, and judged everything. When she finished, he said nothing at first. He just looked at her, that smirk playing faintly at the corners of his mouth, and Maverick could feel his evaluation like a physical weight pressing down on her. Finally he spoke. Not bad for a rookie, not perfect but not bad. Her shoulders sagged slightly with relief, but it was fleeting. Donovan's gaze sharpened. "But understand this, Hayes. That wasn't a training exercise, that was reconnaissance. And the people on that island, they are not playing games. You were lucky to get out intact." Maverick froze. "Recon. There," she hesitated, realizing the implication. "Enemy operatives." Donovan nodded slightly. "Potential threats to national security. We train for aerial skill, for combat acumen. But what you face today, that's the real world. The one that doesn't wait for rookies to be ready." The weight of his words pressed on her chest. She had faced pressure in the cockpit, yes. But this real danger, life and death, faceless adversaries, was something else entirely. Her stomach churned with adrenaline, but beneath it all, a spark of determination ignited. She hadn't just survived, she had adapted. She had made decisions under extreme pressure. Before she could process further, a radio buzzed sharply. Donovan's eyes flicked to it, expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Hayes, stay here. This may concern you." A voice crackled over the comm, distorted but urgent. "Admiral Donovan, Lieutenant Hayes, unauthorized personnel detected approaching Hangar 5. They're armed. No clearance. Advise immediate action." Maverick's pulse spiked. Armed intruders. On base. She instinctively glanced around, noting the positions of fellow pilots, security, and the distance to the nearest exit. Every scenario she had rehearsed in simulations paled in comparison to this. Donovan didn't hesitate. "Follow me, stay close." They moved swiftly through the hangars, Maverick's senses hyper-aware. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Every echo could signal an attack. She thought of the island, of the operatives she had faced there, and realized this might be connected. Someone had tracked her, or Donovan, or both. As they rounded the corner to Hangar 5, Maverick's eyes widened. The doors were partially open, a faint orange glow spilling into the dim interior. Inside, figures moved with deliberate precision. One of them carried what looked like a briefcase, the same type she had handled on the island. Donovan's hand shot out, gripping her shoulder firmly. "Hayes, stay calm, observe, adapt." Maverick swallowed, heart hammering, and crept alongside him, ducking behind crates and shadows. The intruders were methodical, disciplined, and clearly not here for random destruction. They were after something specific. Suddenly, one of the operatives froze, staring directly toward her position. Maverick's stomach dropped. Had they been seen? Her fingers clenched instinctively. Donovan motioned, and she moved silently behind a stack of crates, barely daring to breathe. The operative stepped forward, reaching for the briefcase when a single shot rang out. Not a gunshot, more like a stun device, echoing across the hangar. The operative dropped the case, spinning toward the source. Donovan was already moving, precise and lethal in his calm execution. Maverick's mind raced. She wanted to intervene, to act, but she knew better. Donovan had trained her to survive by observing, by thinking, by choosing the exact right moment to strike. She stayed low, heart pounding, as the situation unfolded. In the chaos, one operative managed to grab the briefcase and sprint toward the hangar exit. Maverick felt a flash of recognition, the black case she had deployed on the island. Could it be the same? Was this a test, or had it been real all along? Before she could react, Donovan barked orders into a handheld comm. Security teams descended like shadows, cutting off escape routes. Maverick realized then that Donovan's calm wasn't casual, it was orchestrated. Every movement, every decision, every reaction had been anticipated. The intruders were contained. The briefcase was recovered. Donovan turned toward her, eyes sharp and intense. Not everyone survives a day like today, Hayes. Most wouldn't even understand what just happened. Maverick's legs trembled with relief, exhaustion, and something else, anticipation. She had survived the island, survived extraction, survived an infiltration on base. But the questions lingering in her mind were louder than ever. Sir, why me? Why now? Why the island, the device, she gestured vaguely toward the operatives. All of it. Donovan's eyes softened slightly, a fleeting glimpse behind the mask of the Admiral. Because, Lieutenant, you're not just a rookie. You have instinct. You adapt. You survive. And sometimes that makes all the difference between life and death for yourself and for everyone counting on you. Maverick nodded, though uncertainty still gnawed at her. She had survived, yes, but survival had revealed only more questions. Who had sent the operatives? Why the device? And most importantly, what was waiting for her next? A soft beep from her comm startled her. A message flashed on the screen, cryptic and chilling. Good, but the real test begins tonight. Are you ready, Maverick? Her breath caught. Donovan's eyes, sharp and knowing, flicked toward hers. A faint smirk teased his lips. Tonight, you'll learn that courage isn't just about flying, Lieutenant. Sometimes it's about facing what you cannot see. Maverick's heart pounded. The island, the intruders, the black case, it had all been only the beginning. She felt the weight of the night pressing down, full of unseen threats and impossible decisions. And somewhere deep in her chest, a spark of defiance flared. She wasn't just surviving, she was learning, and whatever came next, Maverick vowed she would be ready. But as she turned to prepare, a shadow passed over the hangar roof, too fast, too deliberate. Her pulse spiked. Someone was already watching. And this time, they weren't testing her. The sun had disappeared hours ago, leaving the base cloaked in darkness, only dim floodlights casting long, distorted shadows across the tarmac. Maverick adjusted her flight suit, double-checked her helmet, and tightened the harness of her FA-18. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. Tonight wasn't a routine exercise. It was a test Donovan had promised would separate instinct from training, courage from survival. Her mind raced with the day's events. The island, the operatives, the infiltration on base, and the cryptic messages that had haunted her since her first flight. Each memory pressed against her skull like a vice, forcing focus and pushing adrenaline to a fever pitch. Donovan approached quietly, his silhouette sharp against the hangar lights. "Tonight, Hayes," he said, voice low and deliberate, "you face what you've trained for, what you've survived, but now you face unpredictability. Your instincts will be everything, trust them. And remember," he let the words hang heavy with meaning, "the sky doesn't forgive hesitation." Maverick nodded, swallowing hard. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she climbed into the cockpit. She ran pre-flight checks, her hands moving with meticulous precision despite the tension threatening to freeze them. The familiar hum of the engines igniting was both comforting and terrifying. Each vibration was a reminder that tonight, the sky would be more dangerous than any simulation, any training scenario, any test she had faced before. The Hornet roared down the runway, lifting into the night sky. Below, the base faded, replaced by a vast expanse of darkness speckled with distant lights, a black canvas on which danger could appear without warning. Maverick adjusted her instruments, tracking coordinates and mission parameters transmitted by Donovan himself. Her comm crackled with his voice. "You know your target, Hayes. Approach with caution. Time is critical. You have one chance." The coordinates led her over open water toward an uncharted section of the Gulf. Maverick's eyes scanned the darkness below. She could see the glint of waves, the shadows of reefs, and, occasionally, the fleeting movement of vessels too small and too fast to identify. Something was out there, something waiting. Suddenly, radar picked up movement. Multiple contacts closing in fast. Maverick's hands tightened on the controls. "Sir, contacts on radar, multiple approaching fast. Confirm visual." Donovan's voice remained calm, but the edge in it was unmistakable. "Confirmed. Engage only if necessary. Observe, adapt, survive. Avoid detection if you can." Maverick's stomach clenched. She had trained for evasive maneuvers, for dogfights, for split-second reactions. But this was different. Darkness, speed, unknown adversaries. Every instinct screamed tension, every muscle tensed against the invisible forces pressing in from all sides. A sudden flash below, a spotlight sweeping across the water, illuminated a cluster of fast-moving boats. Maverick's heart leapt. They were armed, heavily equipped, and maneuvering like predators. The mission was clear. Navigate through this gauntlet, deliver the device, and return. Failure wasn't an option. Maverick banked sharply, weaving through darkness, dodging the spotlights, timing her movements with precision. The boats adjusted, tracking her trajectory, and she felt the pulse of danger in every twist and turn. One miscalculation, one delayed reaction, and the mission would end in catastrophe. She reached the target coordinates, a floating platform barely visible in the darkness, its silhouette sharp against the faint reflection of moonlight on the water. Maverick steadied her jet, lowering altitude carefully. The device she carried earlier, now integrated with onboard systems, was ready for deployment. She released it with surgical precision, watching it latch onto the platform with green lights confirming activation. A surge of relief washed through her, but it was immediate and short-lived. Radar alarms blared, a new cluster of fast-moving contacts. Maverick's stomach dropped. Another threat, faster and more aggressive, was closing in. Her eyes scanned the horizon. Movement on the platform suggested operatives were already responding to the deployment. Her comm buzzed sharply. Donovan's voice was terse. "Hayes, immediate extraction. Evasive maneuvers full throttle. They are faster than anticipated." Maverick's hands flew over the controls, twisting, banking, climbing. The jet screamed through the night, lights flashing, instruments vibrating violently. One of the boats fired, tracer rounds slicing through the darkness. The air seemed to crackle around her. She dodged instinctively, every fiber of her body screaming with the thrill and terror of survival. Her mind split into pure focus. Speed, trajectory, wind, altitude, enemy movements. The ocean below seemed to stretch infinitely, shadows hiding threats at every turn. Maverick's breathing synchronized with her maneuvers, each motion a dance with danger. Then an unexpected obstacle. A sudden flare erupted beneath her, blinding and disorienting. She struggled to maintain control, rolling sharply to avoid being silhouetted against the fiery glare. The jet shuddered under the stress, but Maverick held, muscles trembling, heart hammering like a war drum. A quick glance at her instruments revealed multiple heat signatures converging. They weren't just tracking, they were closing fast. Maverick had seconds to act. She adjusted throttle, executed a high-G climb, banking sharply to evade pursuit. The night sky became a chaotic canvas of motion, sound, and adrenaline. Her comm crackled again. Donovan's voice, calm but carrying the weight of authority, cut through the chaos. "Hayes, one final maneuver. Follow my lead exactly. Hesitate and you're lost." Maverick nodded, eyes scanning, fingers flying over controls. The instructions were precise, almost surgical. Angles, speed, and trajectory had to align perfectly. She executed them without hesitation. The enemy boats followed her movements, but a sharp rise and a sudden dive threw off their targeting. One missed strike, another aborted. She had escaped their grasp, barely. The gulf stretched before her, dark and endless, but ahead lay the extraction point, a safe zone lit faintly by Donovan's oversight. Maverick banked toward it, adrenaline still surging, muscles trembling from sustained tension. She had survived the deployment, the pursuit, the threat. Yet the weight of the night pressed on her chest, the realization dawning that this mission was more than survival, it was transformation. As she descended toward the safe zone, the faint glow of lights revealed Donovan waiting in another aircraft, his presence steady, commanding. Maverick's pulse began to slow, but only slightly. She had survived the night, the unknown operatives, the impossible maneuvers. But her mind couldn't shake one gnawing thought. Whoever had orchestrated this wasn't done. And then a flicker on the horizon, a single distant flare shooting upward, too deliberate to be random. Maverick's stomach sank. Donovan's voice crackled over the comm, calm but unreadable. "Hayes, welcome to the real sky. And congratulations, you've survived what most wouldn't even comprehend. But don't think tonight is the end. They're waiting." Maverick's hands clenched over the controls. Her body was exhausted, her mind racing, and yet a spark of defiance ignited. She was no longer just a rookie. She was a pilot forged in fire, in shadows, in the edge between life and death. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the horizon, the shadow that had been stalking her since the island waited patiently. The sun had not yet risen, but the pre-dawn light was enough to paint long shadows across the base. Maverick sat in the briefing room, helmet in hand, chest heaving as adrenaline slowly drained from her muscles. She had survived the night mission, navigated deadly waters, and evaded unknown operatives, but Donovan's eyes told her the trial wasn't over. He entered quietly, the weight of authority pressing down on the room. His gaze swept the room, pausing briefly on Maverick. "Sit," he said, voice clipped. No encouragement, no small talk, only expectation. Maverick obeyed instantly, the floor beneath her seeming smaller with the enormity of what lay ahead. "Last night was a measure of skill, instinct, and courage," Donovan began. His eyes were sharp, scanning her like he could see the decisions she had made, the moments of hesitation, the flashes of brilliance. "But surviving a test is not the same as understanding it. You need context." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. Maverick leaned forward involuntarily, heart skipping. The image was grainy but unmistakable, a figure in tactical gear, masked, standing on the same island where she had deployed the device. A silhouette against the rising sun, posture deliberate, holding the same black briefcase she had handled. "That," Donovan said, tapping the photograph, "is Lieutenant Commander Aiden Cross. He's been under observation for years. Brilliant, unpredictable, and extremely dangerous. Last night he wasn't just observing, you encountered him directly." Maverick felt her stomach twist. The operative on the island, the one who had tracked her movements, tested her at every step. It had been Cross all along. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of the night. The shadow at the tree line, the careful pursuit, the precision of every movement. Cross hadn't acted recklessly. He had been calculating, watching her reactions, anticipating her every maneuver. Donovan's gaze bore into her. "Cross is not your enemy yet. He is a measure, a test of your ability to survive under extreme conditions, to think beyond training, and to act decisively when lives are at stake. Most rookies would have failed. Many would not have returned." Maverick's fingers tightened around the edge of her helmet. "Sir, why me? Why choose me for this?" Donovan leaned back, expression unreadable. Because you have what others lack: instinct, courage, adaptability, and most importantly, he paused, letting the words sink in. You are unpredictable. In a world where predictability gets people killed, that makes you valuable. Her mind was spinning, yet somewhere beneath the swirling chaos, a spark of pride flickered. She had survived when others wouldn't have. She had outmaneuvered threats no one else could have anticipated. And now she understood that every challenge, every shadow, every operative she had faced was not just a threat. It was a teaching, a calibration of skill and character. The calm buzzed abruptly, cutting through the moment. Donovan's eyes sharpened. Hayes, you're up. Cross has made a move. The next phase begins immediately. Maverick's pulse spiked. She had survived, adapted, and navigated danger. But now the hunter was active again, and this time the stakes were higher than ever. The mission briefing was delivered quickly, almost too quickly. Cross had moved an asset critical to national security, one that Donovan's team could not recover without precision, stealth, and timing. Maverick was to intercept, retrieve, and extract. Alone. Alone. The word reverberated in her skull, twisting fear into steel. She had survived the island, the intruders, and the night mission with Donovan guiding her. But now it was all on her. Every decision, every instinct, every breath mattered. Failure would not just jeopardize the mission, it could cost lives. The flight to intercept Cross was tense and silent. Maverick's hands flew over the controls of the Hornet, executing maneuvers that would have been impossible hours earlier. Radar blips painted a treacherous path, every shadow a potential trap, every movement critical. Her comm buzzed again. Donovan's voice, calm but loaded with urgency, cut through the hum of the engines. Maverick, he's testing you as much as he's testing the asset. Watch his patterns, predict his moves. One misstep and the mission ends badly. Trust your instincts. Her pulse synced with the jet, eyes scanning, mind calculating. Then the glint of movement, too fast, too deliberate to be coincidental. Cross appeared on the radar, moving along a precise vector, aware of pursuit yet seemingly indifferent to the danger. Maverick's chest tightened. She wasn't chasing him. She was dancing a deadly ballet, one miscalculation away from disaster. She banked sharply, aligning her trajectory with his, her training and instincts blending seamlessly. Every turn, every throttle adjustment, every tilt of the jet was measured, deliberate, synchronized with his patterns. The tension was suffocating. She could almost feel his awareness, his calculation mirrored in her own. Then a sudden flare erupted from Cross's position, a decoy. Maverick's stomach dropped as she realized the asset had been moved. Her heart hammered. He wasn't just testing her reflexes, he was testing her judgment. She adjusted course instantly, following subtle clues, shadows, radar anomalies, the faint disturbance in the air around the decoy. Her mind raced. She had seconds to predict his next move, seconds to act, seconds to survive. The Hornet surged forward, engines screaming, cutting through the night like a blade. Maverick spotted the real asset, a small container secured to a high-speed craft below. Cross was nearby, observing, poised for interception. Maverick's fingers tightened over the controls. This was the moment, the culmination of every test, every flight, every instinct honed to razor-sharp precision. As she descended toward the craft, dodging radar-guided countermeasures and calculating every second, Cross turned. His visor caught the moonlight, glinting with recognition. He wasn't just a target. He was aware of her, analyzing, challenging, waiting for her to falter. And Maverick realized then, this was no longer a test of skill alone. It was a duel of wits, instincts, and courage. And failure wasn't an option, not for her, not for the mission, not for anyone counting on her. Her eyes narrowed, pulse surging, hands steady despite exhaustion. She had survived every challenge Donovan and circumstance had thrown at her. Now it was her move. And in the darkness, Cross mirrored her intensity. the first real confrontation between hunter and hunted about to ignite. The tension hung heavy over the Gulf, the night sky alive with anticipation. One wrong move, one hesitation, one miscalculation, and everything could end in an instant. The Gulf waters below rippled in moonlight, silvered and deceptive. Maverick's FA-18 cut through the night with terrifying precision, engines screaming, every instrument pulsing with life-and-death urgency. She had tracked Cross to the high-speed craft carrying the asset, every fiber of her being alert, every decision honed to the edge of instinct. This was no longer training. This was no longer a test. This was survival, and the culmination of everything she had endured since the first mission briefing. Cross moved with uncanny awareness. Maverick could feel his presence before she even saw him, an invisible force of calculation, skill, and audacity. He had been watching her, pushing her, analyzing every reaction. Tonight, their duel was equal parts aerial choreography and chess. Each maneuver, each adjustment, each calculated dive or climb was a silent communication. She understood the rules, she could respond, she could survive. But could she win? The asset glinted under the pale moonlight, tethered to the craft with unyielding precision. Maverick adjusted her throttle, preparing to descend. The Hornet responded perfectly, every control intuitive, almost an extension of her own body. Yet even as she closed in, Cross was already anticipating her next move, positioning himself between her and the container. Her mind raced. She had seconds to think, calculate, and act. Every instinct, every lesson from the island, the night mission, and the infiltration came together in a flash of clarity. She would need precision, audacity, and intuition, everything Donovan had identified in her from the start. A burst of water erupted from the craft's wake, a diversion. Maverick banked sharply, avoiding the sudden spray, recalculating her approach. Cross mirrored her movement in perfect counterpoint, the duel a dangerous ballet. Neither flinched, neither hesitated, and yet something unspoken passed between them, recognition, respect, the mutual acknowledgement that this was a test of skill, courage, and survival, pushing both to their absolute limits. Maverick dropped lower, skimming the waves, her jet trembling under the strain. Cross moved in parallel, attempting to intercept. She timed a split-second roll, the Hornet spinning gracefully, evading his intercept while maintaining approach to the asset. Every muscle screamed, every nerve fired. She could hear the faint rush of the Gulf, the distant hum of engines, the rapid beat of her own heart. At the last moment, Maverick extended her hook, securing the device with flawless precision. Green lights blinked, the asset secured. She felt a surge of adrenaline, but there was no time for celebration. Cross wasn't finished. He mirrored her extraction move, attempting one final interception. Maverick's instincts kicked in, honed by every test, every fear, every near-fatal moment she had faced. She executed a high-G climb, banking sharply just as Cross followed, outmaneuvering him by a fraction, a hair's breadth. The craft spun beneath her, waves crashing like applause and warning simultaneously. For a suspended moment, the world seemed to pause. Hornet, Gulf, moonlight, and enemy, all aligned in a dangerous, beautiful tableau. Maverick realized something profound. This was why Donovan had chosen her. Not for skill alone, but for the ability to think, adapt, and survive under absolute pressure. Cross, recognizing the impossibility of the interception, pulled back. His visor caught the moonlight one last time. Maverick could feel the silent communication, acknowledgement, respect, challenge accepted and met. He wasn't an enemy tonight. He was the ultimate measure, and she had passed. Maverick initiated her ascent, the Gulf shrinking beneath her as she made the return flight. The base came into view, lights glimmering faintly like a promise of safety. Every maneuver had been executed with precision, every risk calculated and survived. Yet the night wasn't over. Her chest burned from exertion, her mind still alert to shadows, to threats, to the unknown. Finally she landed, Hornet skidding to a controlled stop on the runway. Ground crew rushed to secure her aircraft, but Maverick's eyes searched the horizon first. Donovan was there, arms crossed, expression unreadable but proud. She stepped down, legs trembling, sweat and salt water dripping, helmet still in hand. He approached silently, stopping a few feet away. For a moment they simply regarded each other, the weight of the night lingering like fog. Then finally Donovan spoke, voice low but carrying a rare warmth. "Lieutenant Hayes, today you've not just survived. You've adapted, improvised, and triumphed where most would fail. You've earned the trust of the skis, the Hornet, and me." Maverick's throat tightened. She had never sought approval, only survival, only mastery of her craft. Yet hearing it from Donovan, Admiral Donovan, whose respect was nearly impossible to earn, felt like the culmination of every risk, every flight, every test. She nodded, voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." Donovan's gaze shifted, scanning the base as if weighing the world itself. "You won't have to. But remember, Hayes tonight was only the beginning. The skis are filled with challenges. Shadows are everywhere. And sometimes the next test comes before you even realize the first is complete." Maverick exhaled, a mixture of exhaustion, triumph, and anticipation washing over her. She had faced the island, the intruders, the night pursuit, and Cross himself, and emerged intact, stronger, sharper, more alive than ever. But Donovan's warning lingered, reminding her that this world of precision, courage, and danger never truly allowed rest. As dawn broke over the gulf, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft violets, Maverick stood on the tarmac, wind tugging at her flight suit, eyes scanning the horizon. Somewhere out there, shadows waited, challenges loomed, and tests would continue. But she was ready. And for the first time, she realized something powerful. She was no longer just Maverick. She was a force to be reckoned with, one capable of bringing even the most legendary pilots and the most dangerous adversaries to a halt. The wind shifted. A helicopter whirred faintly overhead, the day awakening. Maverick tightened her gloves, adjusted her helmet, and allowed a small, fierce smile. The skis were hers, and the future was waiting. But in the distance, a faint glint, too deliberate to be accidental, hinted that the game wasn't over, not by a long shot.